Sirens are already screaming in Alaska right now, and people along the coast are running without knowing if they're running fast enough. This is not a drill. A massive glacier has just collapsed. Not in slow motion, not someday, but right now, and the water is answering with a megawave that is already moving like a wall with a target. Scientists are terrified because what's happening beneath this ice isn't just a break, it's a chain reaction. You can hear it in the radio traffic. You can see it in the panic on the docks. Alaska is under threat, and coastal towns are in the path. The first reports hit like a punch. One moment the world is normal, the next moment the glacier face gives way, and the sound is not a crack. It is a deep, violent roar that swallows everything around it. People in nearby bays feel it before they understand it. The ground trembles. The air changes. A cold wind rushes out as if the ice itself exhales its final breath. Then the water reacts, instantly, because something enormous just enters it, and the sea does not accept that kind of impact quietly. Along the shoreline, the first witnesses are not thinking in numbers, not thinking in science, not thinking in events. They are thinking in survival. They are looking out across the water and seeing the surface transform. It goes from rippled and gray to something else, an unnatural tightening, a sudden lift, a widening line that doesn't belong. The horizon looks like it is bending. In harbors and small ports, men and women working the morning routine stop mid-step. A fisherman drops a coil of rope and it falls limp at his boots. A dock worker's radio crackles with a voice that is too fast, too sharp, too loud. The words come fragmented. Ice, collapse, wave, move, get out. Boats rock in a way that doesn't match the wind. The water level inlets begin to pull back as if the ocean is inhaling, draining away from the pilings, exposing wet rocks and slick seaweed that seconds ago are underwater. That retreat is the first visible warning to the people who know the coast, and those who know the coast do not debate what it means. They run. Vehicles start moving before official notices even finish loading into emergency systems. People slam doors, throw children into back seats, grab dogs by collars, pull elderly relatives out of chairs. There is no neat evacuation line, no orderly procession. It is chaos born from instinct, and the instinct is screaming one message: higher ground. Out over the water, the wave is not a single splash. It is a moving front, a traveling pressure, a vast surge. It builds as it travels. It eats distance. It turns open water into a weapon aimed at the towns that sit low, that sit close, that live on the edge of the sea because the sea is their lifeline, until it becomes the thing that hunts them. Officials are scrambling because the collapse is not a routine landslide and not a minor calving. The voice of authority is suddenly fragile. Dispatch centers are flooded with calls. People asking what to do, people asking where to go, people asking if this is real. And the response is not calm reassurance. The response is strained urgency. The response is leave. Emergency alerts begin to hit phones. Short, blunt, inhumanly efficient. Evacuate low-lying coastal areas. Move to higher ground. Stay away from shorelines. Do not attempt to watch. Do not approach. The wording is clinical, but the tone behind it is panic, because the people writing it know the clock is already running. Scientists and monitoring stations are not watching from a distance like spectators. They are staring at screens that spike and jump and refuse to settle. Instruments record sudden movement, rapid displacement, signals that say something huge just happened and the environment is still adjusting. People in labs, in offices, in field stations, faces hardening as they realize this is not just an ice event. This is a water event. This is a coastal event. This is a human event. Inside emergency operations centers, maps are pulled up, overlays dropped in, zones highlighted. The coastline is not a line on paper anymore. It is a boundary between life and impact. Town names become countdown markers. The question is not whether a wave exists. The question is where and when it hits with the most force. And there is a second question, darker, louder, rising in the background. Is this the only collapse? Because a glacier does not always fail alone. When a massive section breaks, it can destabilize what remains. The fracture lines are hidden in the ice like cracks in a windshield. One strike and suddenly the entire surface is compromised. The collapse can trigger more collapse, more ice, more rock, more weight into water, more waves. The warning signs are there, but nobody has time to appreciate them like a documentary narrator from the safety of hindsight. The signs are there in the way the glacier has been behaving, the way it groans, the way it shifts, the way it sheds ice with growing frequency. People who work near it talk about strange sounds in recent days. Deep booms, distant thunder that doesn't match the sky. The ice looks different in the morning light, more jagged, more broken. Meltwater streams carve pathways across the surface, disappearing into holes that look like mouths. In coastal towns, the ocean itself has been acting wrong. Unusual currents, strange chop, a sense that the water has become impatient. Locals feel it and shake their heads and call it weird, but now that weird becomes a warning that arrives too late to be comforting. The moment the glacier collapses, the water displacement is immediate. A mass of ice and debris plunges down, slamming into the bay or fjord like a giant fist. The impact throws up spray that turns into a wall of mist. The sound rolls outward. The wave begins there, born from violence, and the geography around it channels that violence like a funnel. This is the nightmare of narrow waterways. A surge has nowhere to spread, nowhere to dissipate gently. It stacks, it amplifies. It runs like a stampede through the passageways toward open communities that are not designed to withstand a moving mountain of water. On the coast, sirens wail, but sirens do not move people fast enough when roads are limited and time is short. Some towns have only one main route out. Some have winding climbs that bottleneck instantly. Some have no real out at all, only up. And up might mean climbing in panic while the ocean races forward. The first images, because in this world someone always records, are shaky, breathless, filled with screaming wind and muffled curses. The camera points toward the water and catches something impossible. A line of rising sea, a swelling that does not look like a normal wave. It looks like the ocean is standing up. Then the power begins to flicker in places closest to the water. Substations near the shoreline take on moisture, spray, vibration. Lights blink. Communication lines become unstable as towers sway and fiber routes near the coast risk damage from inundation. The systems people rely on, phone service, radio repeaters, local internet, start to degrade at the exact moment everyone needs them most. The emergency agencies react like a body slammed into adrenaline. Coast Guard assets shift posture. Local police abandon routine calls to focus on evacuation. Fire departments send units toward higher staging points because they know, if the wave hits, the low ground becomes unreachable. Paramedics begin triage planning without patients yet, because they know what comes with water impact. Drowning, crushing injuries, hypothermia, shock. And the official statements, when they come, are clipped and urgent. Not polished, not calm. It is the sound of people who know they are behind the event. They are responding to a reality already in motion. Meanwhile, the wave is not slowing. The wave is not asking permission. It moves with unstoppable intent, and the coastline becomes a series of targets. Every cove, every harbor, every inlet, each one can focus the energy and drive it inland. Water that surges into a harbor can rise and rise and rise, climbing over docks, ripping boats free, slamming them into buildings like battering rams. A moored vessel becomes a missile, a shipping container becomes a coffin, fuel tanks become bombs waiting for a spark. The worst-case scenario doesn't require imagination. It requires one look at how coastal towns are built: low, tight, functional. Homes close to the water, stores close to the docks, power lines and roads hugging the shoreline because that is where the flat land is. That is where life is easiest. Until the sea decides it is not. As the megawave approaches, the air above the coast begins to fill with a strange rising noise, like wind, but heavier. Dogs bark and pull at leashes. Birds lift off in sudden, frantic flocks. Some people freeze because the brain cannot accept what the eyes are reporting. Others move like their lives depend on it because they do. A family in a small house near the water hears the alert too late. The phone vibrates, they glance at it, they read words that don't feel real. Evacuate, now. They grab what they can, coats, shoes, a bag, because Alaska's cold does not care about disaster. A child cries because the adults are shouting, and shouting means danger even if the child cannot name it. They stumble into the car, but the street is already jammed. Headlights stack up. Engines rev, horns blare. Someone yells from a window. Someone else abandons their vehicle and starts running uphill on foot. Down at the docks, workers who spent their lives reading tides and weather are now reading terror. They see the water suck outward, exposing the bottom in a way it shouldn't. They know that retreat is the ocean pulling back to strike harder. They scream at anyone still standing near the edge. Get back, get away, move. In a small grocery store, shelves rattle from distant vibration. A clerk tries to keep the doors open as people rush in and out, grabbing bottled water, blankets, anything that feels like control. But control is an illusion. The only real control is elevation. On roads leading away from the shore, the traffic becomes a single choking artery. Some vehicles stall. Some drivers panic and make reckless moves. Emergency vehicles fight against the flow, trying to get in while everyone else is trying to get out. The sound becomes a layered wall: sirens, engines, shouting, radio chatter. And then the first hit happens somewhere along the coast. It is not always visible to the next town over, but it is felt. The sound arrives like a thunderclap. The ground shakes. A rolling boom echoes through the valleys. People look back over their shoulders and see a white surge erupting upward where water meets land. The coastline disappears behind spray. The wave pushes into the town like a living thing. It climbs over the first line of docks, snaps pilings like twigs, lifts boats as if they are toys. It slams them into each other, into buildings, into whatever stands in its path. Wooden structures splinter instantly. Metal screams as it bends. Glass explodes outward. The water is filled with debris. Planks, barrels, nets, fuel slicks, pieces of lives. The wave does not stop at the edge. It goes further. It invades streets. It surges between buildings. It finds every low point and fills it violently. And as it recedes, it drags things back with it. Cars, people, fragments, pulling them toward deeper water like a relentless hand. In another area, the surge slams into a seawall built for normal storms. Not for this. The barrier is overwhelmed. Water spills over, then tears parts of it away. The town's protective line becomes rubble in seconds. Authorities attempt to reassert order, but the event is too fast. Orders lag behind reality. Updates are outdated the moment they are spoken. Some evacuation zones are already impacted while officials are still issuing warnings to leave them. And now the cascading risks begin. Because the wave doesn't only bring water, it brings system collapse. Power outages spread as substations flood and lines short. Streetlights wink out. Homes go dark. In the darkness, panic accelerates. People cannot see what is coming, cannot see where to step, cannot see the hazards floating in the water. Communication starts failing in pockets. Overloaded cell networks, damaged equipment, towers losing backup power. Calls drop. Texts fail. People lose contact with family members, and that absence becomes a new form of terror. Not knowing is worse than hearing bad news, because the imagination fills the silence with disaster. Fuel leaks become visible as rainbow slicks spreading across the water's surface. The smell of gasoline mixes with salt and mud. A single spark, an electrical short, a generator, a damaged vehicle, can ignite it. Fire on water is a nightmare that moves faster than running feet. Roads are cut off by flooding and debris. Bridges become critical points, and critical points become choke points. If a bridge is damaged or blocked, whole neighborhoods become trapped. If the water undermines a roadway, it collapses without warning, swallowing vehicles. In emergency centers, the operational picture becomes chaotic. Reports come in from different areas: wave height here, inundation there, injuries, missing persons, boats loose, buildings hit. The information is messy, emotional, sometimes wrong, because people are reporting through fear, but the overall pattern is clear. This is expanding. And then the bigger looming threat arrives in the minds of the people who track these systems for a living. They know a glacier collapse can be part of a larger instability. They know that if the ice mass failure triggers landslides, and landslides trigger additional waves, the coastline can be hit again and again. Not one impact, but multiple strikes. Not one surge, but a sequence. They also know the region is not isolated from other dangers. Alaska is vast, rugged, and unforgiving. If infrastructure is damaged, help is not minutes away. It is hours. It is days. Some towns are reachable only by air or sea, routes that become dangerous or impossible during a coastal disaster. And the weather is always waiting, always capable of turning a crisis into a catastrophe. If storms move in, if visibility drops, if winds rise, rescue becomes harder and survival becomes colder. Human stories begin emerging from the chaos, and they are not heroic speeches. They are raw fragments. A mother clutches her child on a hillside, looking down at where their home stands. Except now, it doesn't stand the same. Water surrounds it. Debris jams against it. The mother's breathing is loud in the cold air. The child asks for a pet left behind, and the mother cannot answer because the truth is too sharp. A commuter who works at the docks tries to drive out, but the road is blocked by stalled cars and rising water. He abandons the vehicle, waiting at first, then running, then climbing. His boots slip on wet gravel. He hears something behind him, an impact, a crash, and he doesn't turn around because turning around wastes time and time is life. An elderly man refuses to leave at first because he has lived through storms, because he has seen the ocean angry before. But this is different. This is not wind-driven. This is impact-driven. This is the sea reacting to violence. When he finally steps outside and sees the water retreating unnaturally, his face changes. He moves faster than anyone expects, not because his legs are strong, but because fear is. Emergency responders are overwhelmed almost immediately. They are trained for house fires, for car crashes, for routine rescues. They are not designed for an entire coastline shifting into disaster mode at once. They make choices that haunt them. Which call to answer first? Which area to reach before another? They stage where they can, and sometimes where they can is not where people are screaming for them to be. Helicopters, if they are launched, fight turbulent air and uncertain landing zones. Boats, if they deploy, face chaotic currents, debris fields, and the possibility of secondary waves. Every rescue attempt carries new danger, and the infrastructure keeps failing. Water treatment systems near the shoreline are compromised. Saltwater intrusion threatens freshwater supplies. Sewage systems overflow. Contamination becomes an invisible enemy, turning floodwater into something that can make survivors sick even if they escape the initial hit. Hospitals and clinics, if present, shift to emergency operations, but they may lose power or become cut off. Generators hum, but fuel is finite. Supplies are finite. Staff are finite. And injured people keep arriving, soaked, shivering, bleeding, shaking from shock. Schools and community centers become shelters, but shelters fill fast. People arrive with nothing but wet clothes and fear. Families are separated, names are shouted, lists are attempted, but the situation is too fluid. Meanwhile, the coastline remains under threat because the source of the disaster may still be unstable. The glacier face, what remains of it, can still be moving. Additional sections can still fail. The surrounding slopes can still give way if they are destabilized by the collapse. And every additional mass entering water can generate another surge. Officials and scientists exchange urgent messages, trying to interpret live signals. They look for changes in movement, changes in pressure, changes in the patterns that suggest more is coming. But nature does not send clear bulletins. Nature sends violence. The public messaging becomes sharper. Do not return to the coast. Do not attempt to retrieve belongings. Stay away from shorelines. The danger is ongoing, and the reason they say ongoing is because nobody can guarantee the wave sequence is finished. In some areas, the sea continues to surge in strange pulses, water rising and falling in ways that don't match the normal rhythm. That instability is terrifying because it means the system is still ringing like a bell after a strike. The economic lifelines of these towns, fishing fleets, docks, processing facilities, are now damaged or destroyed. People watch the livelihoods of entire communities float away in splintered pieces. Nets drift like ghosts. Boats overturn. Equipment disappears under brown, foaming water. And in the middle of that, the human mind does what it always does under extreme threat. It searches for meaning, for someone to blame, for something to cling to. But there is no neat villain. There is only impact and consequence. The larger looming threat expands beyond one coastline. Nearby regions begin to prepare because they do not know the full reach. They do not know how far the energy travels. They do not know which bays will amplify it, which shores will reflect it, which harbors will trap it and raise the water higher than anyone thinks possible. Communities that are not yet hit become trapped in anticipation, the worst kind of waiting. People gather on high points, staring at the sea, watching for an unnatural line. Some record, some pray, some stand silent, hearing only the wind and their own heartbeat. And then more reports arrive, of secondary impacts, of sudden surges, of water behaving like it is still trying to settle, still trying to find equilibrium after being violently displaced. Nighttime makes everything worse. Darkness hides the water's edge. It hides debris. It hides cracks in pavement. It hides downed lines. People move with flashlights that cut narrow cones through the black, and every shadow feels like danger. Search and rescue becomes a war against time and cold. Hypothermia becomes a quiet killer. People pulled from water are pale, shaking, barely conscious. Blankets are wrapped around them, hands are held, names are repeated, because keeping someone awake can keep them alive. And through it all, the sound of the coast remains wrong. It is not the calm lap of water. It is the churn of a system still disturbed. It is the groan of structures under stress. It is the distant crack of ice shifting somewhere out in the darkness. Officials attempt to assess damage, but assessments are incomplete because the event is still unfolding. Some areas are unreachable, some roads are gone, some communication is dead, and every hour that passes without contact from a pocket of people becomes heavier. The fear spreads beyond those directly impacted because the words megawave do not stay local. They travel through news feeds, through social media, through phone calls to relatives in other states. People far away watch clips and feel their stomachs drop because the footage looks unreal, like a movie, except the screaming is real, and the sirens are real, and the water is real. The narrative intensifies because the systems at play feel bigger than one collapse. If the glacier collapses like this now, what else is unstable? What other ice faces are fractured? What other slopes are saturated and ready to slide? The questions are not asked calmly. They are felt as dread. Scientists are terrified not because they enjoy fear, but because they see patterns and they know how quickly a stable-looking environment can become a chain reaction environment. They know that once a region starts failing, ice, rock, water, it can trigger more failures. And they know there are limits to forecasting when the signals are screaming and the reality is already moving. In coastal towns, the aftermath begins even as the threat remains. People walk through mud and debris, searching for what is left. Some find nothing, some find pieces, photographs soaked and stuck to boards, clothing tangled in weeds, toys wedged against fences. The quiet grief begins to mix with ongoing panic because the water can come again. Emergency shelters fill with the sound of crying, coughing, whispered conversations, and sudden bursts of anger. People are exhausted and cold and shocked. They ask for loved ones, they ask for news, they ask for certainty. Certainty does not arrive. Instead, the official updates keep repeating one thing: stay away from the coast. The danger is not over. The region remains unstable, additional waves are possible, and outside, the sea remains restless. Somewhere out there, beneath fractured ice and dark water, the environment is still adjusting to the violence that just occurred. The coastline is still in motion, the system is still ringing. Alaska is under threat, and the terrifying truth is that the first collapse is not always the last. The megawave has already proven what one sudden failure can do, what it can erase in minutes, what it can change in seconds. And now the entire coast is listening for the next sound, another crack, another roar, another surge. Because if what's happening beneath this ice continues, the next wave may not be the one people see coming. And the question hanging over every coastal town tonight is this: what breaks next?